everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Limudi Festival. It's so exciting to have you here today. We're just getting started this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. But it's incredible. We're joined with over 500 people from across North America and actually some around the world for more than 40 sessions of Jewish learning this afternoon. And I can think of no more exciting way to start our day of learning than by having a conversation this afternoon, really, with three really remarkable human beings, Jewish leaders, who are doing incredible work and with us here in this session about the Jewish Future Pledge. So whether you are here in Zoom or whether you're joining us via Facebook Live and yet to sign in for the rest of the conference, welcome, good morning, good afternoon again. And really, it's just an extraordinary honor and pleasure to introduce to you our panel this morning on the Jewish Future Pledge. We're joined by Mike Leven, by Mark Silberman, and by Amy Holtz, who I will pause my introduction for 2 seconds so that I can show their faces to you all as I tell you a little bit about them. Mike Leven is a legendary business executive and visionary philanthropist. Inspired by Warren Buffett's and Bill Gates's giving pledge, Mike co-founded the Jewish Future Pledge to carry on his family's commitment to Judaism. Mike currently serves on the boards of the Marcus Foundation, the API Fraternity Foundation, and the Birthright Israel Foundation, among others. Mark Silberman is a partner and co-owner with Refrigerware, the world's leader in cold weather industrial work clothing and accessories. Mark is a past president of Temple Kehilat Chaim in Roswell, Georgia, as well as a national board member of the Union for Reform Judaism. He recently finished his tenure as chair of the board of the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta and has served on the board of trustees for the past 8 years as the campaign chair in 2017 on numerous federation committees and the National JNF board. Mark also serves on the board of Hillels of Georgia, the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, and the Alliance Theater. Amy Holtz is a passionate advocate for Jewish community in the state of Israel. In 2016, she was named one of the 50 most influential Jews by the Jerusalem Post. Amy has more than 2 decades of experience leading and growing businesses and nonprofits. In addition to working on the Jewish Future Pledge, Amy is CEO of Traction Specialists, which empowers entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders to build their businesses and reach their personal potential by implementing the entrepreneurial operating system. So we're going to be in conversation with Amy, Mike, and Mark for about the next half hour. Then we'll open up to any questions y'all may have as we go further and deeper with learning about their work this morning. It's an incredible opportunity to be able to start our day talking with them, this being now the 4th e-festival we've been able to have since the start of this pandemic. These are extraordinary times, but we hope everyone is holding up okay, all things considered. So if I may, Mike, I'm gonna ask to unmute you. You're gonna still need to unmute yourself, but let's start with you. And if you would, for a second, will you tell us and tell our participants here about the Jewish Future Pledge and what you're trying to achieve, and also particularly what led you to start the Jewish Future Pledge?
Well, thank you very much, David. Well, there were actually 3 people involved that had an influence on this entire thing, and another helping me execute it. The first happened in the summer of 2017, when I was at the Jewish Community Center in Aspen listening to a lecture by David Horowitz, the editor of the Jewish Times. He gave a lecture which was very scary. He gave statistics about Jewish participation by generation, which was 93% in my parents' generation, 86% in my generation, falling to as little as 68% in the generation of millennials, which gave me pause to think about what's going to happen to us if we lose 33% of our population and support. The next presentation he gave was about wealth transfer, and where he gave indications that the wealth transfer from the generation in North America, not only of Jewish people, but of all people, amounted to a staggering amount of $68 trillion, and was estimated to be about 6.3 trillion of that was going to be Jewish legacy giving or legacy money for support and what have you. And he asked a very simple question. How much of that funding would continue for Jewish causes in the state of Israel? And he was worried about it. So that was the first person. In the summer of 2018, the second person was Mark Silberman, who sits on this panel today. We were guests, paying guests at the Hyatt Hotel in Aspen, Colorado. And at that time, he was the late chair of the Federation of Atlanta, where I still participate, even though I spend most of my time in Florida these days. Mark called me and said, would you like to have breakfast? And I said, Mark, if you're going to solicit me, I said, I've already done my pledge. So why do you want to go to breakfast? And he said, well, I love pancakes and I do want to talk to you about something else. So I said, okay. So I went to breakfast with Mark, and Mark convinced me during the course of that breakfast to participate in some donor advised funds at the Federation, which he was trying to build up to a $1 billion foundation. And I said, okay, I'll do 3 funds. I'll do a small fund for each one of my 3 sons. At that time, they were 53, 51, and 49. And so I went home and I told my wife I was going to do that for the 3 sons. And she asked me a very simple question. She is the third person that became involved in the Jewish Future Pledge, because she said to me, Mike, I'm okay with doing the donor advised funds, but how do you know your 3 boys are going to spend the money Jewishly? And I sat there and I remembered what David Horowitz said. And I just said, gee, I don't know. She said, well, I don't want to do it unless a serious percentage commitment of the donor advised funds is designated for Jewish causes in the state of Israel. I said, okay. So we sat with our 3 sons, we talked about it, and we said, that's what we want to do. And we allocated 75% or more to Jewish causes in the state of Israel. After which, the idea of a Jewish Future Pledge was born. And that's how it started. And I went to Bernie Marcus and I said, is this an idiotic idea? But why can't we have a Jewish Future Pledge, just like the Buffett Pledge, but not for billionaires, but for every Jew who's participating in a Jewish organization, or just a Jewish, didn't have to be all the wealthy foundations. It could be any Jew who's leaving money for charitable purposes in a donor advised fund, in an estate plan, or in a foundation. And Bernie said, it's a great idea. Let's do it. And I said, well, let's do it at 50% or more, leaving enough money for Jewish people to also support their communities. But let's get a share of the action, which would be somewhere in the vicinity of $630 billion that's going to be left to the next generation, not all for charitable purposes, but potentially for charitable purposes. So that's how it started. Amy Holtz found out about it. She said, I want to work on this. And I said, okay, you have a job. She said, I can do it part-time. Well, I hired her for part-time, but she's working probably most of the time for the Jewish Future Pledge these days. We then hired a couple of other people. And we've been going for, I think March will be 2 years, Amy, if I'm not correct. And I think she'll be able to fill you in, and so will Mark, on all the rest of the stuff we've done. But that's the answer to the question, trying to be as short as possible as to how it started. And here it goes. It has its own 501c3, which I'm a sole supporter. We don't raise money from people. We don't ask for money from people. We're probably one of the only Jewish organizations that doesn't solicit funds. We solicit pledges, moral commitments to charitable giving to the next generation is going to go 50% or more to Jewish causes in the state of Israel.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Mike. Mark, tell us, why was it important to you and your wife to sign the Jewish Future Pledge, and what conversations have you had about your commitment with your children and the rest of your family?
Well, after I sort of had decided that I felt like I wanted to insert myself in the work of the Jewish Pledge in partnership with Mike and Amy, I sort of went home and had a conversation with my wife, and I said, listen, this is important. We should do this. And she said, yeah. I get it. We should do it. It's very important. And so we signed the pledge together, and we did like what most people do. We made a copy of it. The placeholder in Atlanta is the Atlanta Jewish Foundation. So we sent the pledge directly into them. And then I kept it on my desk for 3 months and looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And then I had a sort of, coffee with my wife, and I said, listen, we it's not good enough that we just signed this thing. We sort of have to go to the next level. We really should think about talking to the children about it. I have 4 children all married. I have 6 grandchildren already. I'm blessed. And we really should, sort of call a meeting. And so we decided that we would call a family meeting, and all 4 of my children are married. And in each of those marriages, there is a different religion in the household other than Judaism or Jewish. And so we decided that we would include all the spouses, we would include everybody together, and we had a family meeting. And my wife and I actually wrote a letter, a little legacy letter, we called it, as to why this was so important. It's about 1.5 pages, and we read it to the family. And it really sort of evoked a tremendous amount of response from the children and all my daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws, et cetera. And where we've evolved from that, a year later, is that the Silverman family now does family philanthropy together. We never did that before. I didn't think that was anything my children were even remotely interested in, but out of sort of this recognition of the Jewish Future Pledge. Now, remember, the Jewish Future Pledge is for assets when you pass on that are going to charity, 50%. And so they were they thought that's a great idea and they can't wait, but they realized that it's going to be a while before maybe they would understand how to use that money. And they wanted to use this transitional time period, obviously, to get more involved in philanthropy. And we've had some really serious meetings about my wife and I, Linda, our values and why we've been giving to certain institutions and what we see Jewish life in the future to be like, and then challenging them to bring ideas and suggestions, not only in the Jewish world, but things that they might not be interested in. They might be interested in a non-Jewish world. So it's been sort of transformative for us. It's not really about how much money we're actually giving now. It's really about the focus of really educating and getting the next generation, which would be our children. Some of the grandchildren are not quite old enough yet, but I know there's discussions among the children about how to sort of circle the wagons and bring them through the process too, either in giving circles or tzedakah or things like that, which, prior to meeting Mike and prior to maybe a couple of years ago, this was not on my radar. I have a donor advised fund at the Federation, and just a light bulb went off and said, like, if something happened to my wife and I, what would happen to that money? Who would be giving it away? What would we be doing? How would we guarantee that there would be money left for the Jewish world? So obviously I'm all in on this 100%. My own personal family story is a great one, and it's been very rewarding to me to work on this.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Let's bring Amy into the conversation. Amy, clarify for us, is the Jewish Future Pledge just about ensuring commitments and pledges from especially wealthy people, or might everyone have a part to play in your effort?
David, thank you. Thank you for having us. The Jewish Future Pledge, as Mike said, is for everybody. Whether you have $10 or $10 million to leave to charity. The Torah teaches us that we all have a role to play in the Jewish story. Every one of us counts. Mike made the decision to go forward with the Jewish Future Pledge the week of the Parsha Shekalim, where you had to give half a shekel to be counted. It didn't matter your socioeconomic status, but just by the act of giving, you were counted. Giving something makes us count, and we all matter. We all have a role to play in the Jewish future. We hope that everyone is going to join us, rich, poor, everyone will step up and be counted, help us ensure vibrant Jewish life continues for generations to come.
It's a beautiful pitch. Very nice.
Now I want you to sign, David.
That's not going to be hard, especially now that you've allowed people who have zero wealth to sign on as well. So
your story's not over.
Mike, tell us, if you will, following up on this really direct pitch that Amy just made, like why is it important that Jewish leaders sign the pledge, and how might Jewish leaders fit into this for you?
Because, that's a very simple question, actually, David. People look to leaders for examples. We have hundreds of Jewish organizations. Our goal is to have every board member of every Jewish organization and every leader of every Jewish organization sign the pledge to set an example. Not only that, for the life cycle of these organizations, but continue on after the next generation takes over, they have to have a raison d'etre, a reason to be. They have to set an example so that the next generation, I don't worry about our generation. I worry about the next generation and the generation after that. Lots of organizations spend their time figuring out how they're going to make this year's budget. This is not like a corporation that goes on for a long time. In order to survive, we have to also worry about next year's budget and the budget after that on a generational basis. So if we get the leaders to participate, professionals, Jewish professionals, as well as the leaders, the wealthy leaders, they will set the example for others. And we have gotten people as far away as South Africa signing a Jewish future pledge. We actually got an African, I don't know if he's American, an African guy signed the pledge from, I don't know, someplace, Liberia or someplace, signed the pledge because he saw it on the website. And so these are examples they'll set and hopefully talk to their children and their grandchildren. And I can say for anybody who's watching this, the look you'll find on the faces of your grandchildren and your children is fabulous. It's a fabulous experience to see them commit and say that they are going to, after you're gone, to spend whatever you leave them for charitable purposes on making sure that they're not the last Jews. And I get that question all the time. Why do you do what you do? And I said, my job is not to be the last Jewish generation. And I want that to go generationally. So leaders must set the example. That's what leadership's about.
I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have metrics or data of how many Jewish leaders specifically you've counted as having signed the pledge at this point?
Amy probably has a better answer than that than I, because everybody who signed is on the website. I think we're over 600 signatures now. And she can probably give you an estimate of how many really appropriate Jewish leaders have signed. I don't have exactly the number. But we do have Charles Bronfman, we do have Bernie Marcus, we do have a number of people, we have a number of rabbis. I think Amy may have that number, but I don't know if it's on the top of her head.
Yeah. We have a lot of Jewish leaders, Foundation for Jewish Camping, all the cool ones. That's why.
It doesn't cost anything to make, it doesn't cost anything to sign.
Limmud North America is excited to be part of all the cool ones and work in support of the Jewish.
I mean, everybody says to me when I talk about it, he said, this is a no-brainer. I can't understand why everybody doesn't sign. And it's not easy. It's not easy to get the signatures because one person had to call his lawyer to make sure it wasn't. And I said, this is a moral commitment. It's not bound by a legal commitment. So,
right.
And we're making a lot of progress now. So,
yeah. Yeah, we're getting calls from all the big organizations. People are really excited about it. We've only been around for about a year, but it's really starting to pick up momentum. We are partnering with Morgan Stanley Gift, and with JF&A, we're about to announce 10 Federation partnerships, local partnerships. We're talking to some of the major Jewish organizations. AEPI is an official partner. I think we closed Limmud just now. So it's really growing. I have a whole bunch of calls next week with major organizations. People are very excited about it.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Mark, let's go back to you. What's the main message you want to send to communities or individuals considering making the pledge?
Well, if you're even thinking about what's going to happen to Jewish life in the future, we really need to have people signing the Jewish Future Pledge so we have assets available for future generations to not only invest in Jewish life in the sort of the legacy organizations that we've been funding for years, but what might be new innovative organizations that are going to come down the road. The other thing I would like to say is that 10, 20 years from now, there will be a fantastic amount of people who will thank us for starting the Jewish Future Pledge now, because it's going to take a commitment over an extended period of time to incorporate the Jewish Future Pledge into the culture of philanthropy. And so the culture of philanthropy can be what's taking place now, but how we have to invest and reserve for the future. And so I think that's one of the important distinctions about the Jewish Future Pledge, that it sort of looks out at the horizon and looks out over a period of time. And I would urge everybody, on this call to sign the pledge. Like Mike said, it's you can sign online. It's a moral agreement, or it's a moral pledge. We would expect everybody at some point in time to sort of take a real hard look at that and legalize it either in their will, their donor advised fund, or their foundation, to make sure that the next generation understands, what you're trying to accomplish. And obviously, don't wait to legalize it. Talk to your family right away.
Yeah,
Thank
David,
you.
I just want to say that our goal is that the Jewish Future Pledge is like the living will. Everybody considers it when they're doing their estate plan or when they're doing their giving planning. We just want to create a culture of legacy giving in the Jewish world because the opportunity is tremendous.
On that note, Amy, Suzanne just asked in our chat window how she can get some information about this to share with her synagogue or friends from smaller communities. Is it best to refer to your website, which we've put the link into the chat box, or somewhere else?
That would be great. Or you could email me, amy@jewishfuturepledge.org, or sign up on our website. We would love that, Suzanne.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Amy, let's talk about storytelling and how does storytelling fit into the work you're doing, and what is why is the storytelling aspect so important to the success of the Jewish Future Pledge?
The storytelling component is my favorite part of the Jewish Future Pledge. It's not just about sharing your money. It's about sharing your wisdom, values, and life lessons. There's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, we are a culture of storytellers. The Torah is filled with stories. Secondly, our world is filled with so much confusion, fear, and uncertainty. You could get on the internet and read compelling arguments on either side of any issue. I just watched the movie Social Dilemma, and it shows how artificial intelligence is manipulating what we think and feel. Our children are looking for wisdom, and they are looking to us. They're looking to their parents and their grandparents. We're trusted brands. We're going to be even more trusted what we have to say after we pass. The last thing is, the research shows that kids who know their family narrative are actually emotionally healthier. This is real research. What it shows is three things. First of all, they see themselves as part of something bigger than just themselves, part of a larger intergenerational family. Secondly, it helps them navigate life's inevitable challenges. And third, stories just make us feel less alone. This guy, Dr. Marshall Duke at Emory University, he says just the act of refining, telling, and resharing the positive moments of your family and the times you bounce back from adversity will help your family thrive for generations to come. I really believe sharing your story is the greatest gift you could give to your children and your descendants. And my mother, who's on the call, she has these family trees. Imagine you could click on the family tree. She goes back generations and hear their story. How cool would that be? Not just their names. Mike just wrote a great book, which many people get the advantage of, but his children and grandchildren are going to love that book forever.
David,
Right?
this is
Yeah.
a picture. This is a picture of my grandfather and me at 4 years old, done in 1941, which is in my book. My grandfather, when I lived with for the first 16 years of my life, he came from a small little town outside of Odessa called Slavitia, which happened to be famous for Torah interpretation and Torah writing. He came in 1896. He never made more than $50 a week. Whatever he made, he gave away, believe it or not. He borrowed money to support relatives. When he died, I heard all the stories, and he told me the story. And his story, a little bit of that story, those stories are in my book. And these are the stories. I wrote this book to pass on to my children what I grew up with. because we also grew up with this box. And every Friday afternoon, I tell them, every Friday afternoon, someone came with a beard to the back door of our apartment to pick up the full box of pennies for the Jewish National Fund and gave us a fresh box to fill up. So I show that to my children. I tell my children and my grandchildren, because that's because when they ask me, why am I charitable? I said, I was taught to be, to honor my grandparents, to honor their commitment to the state of Israel, to plant trees and to be there. My grandfather never got there. But in 1971, when I went to Israel on business for the first time to be a consultant to a hotel building that was being done in Eilat, my father was widowed. My mother had passed away. I took my father with me and we walked the ground and went to the wall together. And those are stories that say, we have to survive. And unfortunately, we can't survive without the donations of people that have the capability to provide that support for all the Jewish organizations that all the people on this call are working with today, or they wouldn't be here. So that's the story that has to go on.
What an inspiring story.
Yeah, it's a beautiful. I also want to add something. When Mike's grandparents were giving away that money, they didn't have it. We are living in a time of unprecedented wealth, right? For us, this is easy.
Well, let me ask a follow-up question that you just really hit at, Amy, and I'll give this to Mike. But you know, we are living in a time of unprecedented wealth. We're also living in a moment of economic uncertainty in which so many of our organizations are, if not struggling financially, concerned that at any moment we may be struggling financially. So does the Jewish Future Pledge present any sort of funding competition to organizations? Does it become any sort of threat of cannibalizing monies that when there's at least more of a perception of limit at this moment?
That's a bell-tie fastball or a soft question, because of course it doesn't, because this is dealing with not today. This is dealing with the future. This is dealing with what happens. We have emergency campaigns. Mark ran an emergency campaign for the Federation in Atlanta, which I participated with some of the donor advised funds, and my kids did also. So it's not talking about today. It's talking, there will always be crises in the Jewish world. There will always be economic crises. But at the end of the day, I think the wealth anticipation that we're talking about is going to go on. And it will change from time to time. But the Jewish Future Pledge doesn't ask for anything today. It asks to be concerned about tomorrow.
Well, thank you, Mike. Folks, we got a few more minutes left. If there's any questions that y'all want to ask, I'm happy to. Well, we've got old-fashioned. Brian is raising his actual hand rather than pressing the raise hand button. Let me find him and unmute him. And Brian, why don't you ask a question for our esteemed panel? But you're going to need to allow me to unmute you.
Thank you very much. The first question is a simple one, I think, and that is, once the funds are realized, is it the funds that themselves that can be used, the capital, or is it just the income from the capital?
Are you talking about in donor advised funds?
Well, the funds for the Future Pledge Fund.
Yeah. I mean, if they're in a foundation, it can be used for income from the foundation if it maintains the foundation. You're allowed in a foundation to give away, you must give away at least 5% of the foundation's principal every year. And some do that and some give more. In a donor advised fund, you can give away what the donor advised funds earns on a yearly basis, or you can go into the principal. There's no restriction on either one of those unless some foundation has a bylaw that's put in by the trustees of the foundation to only spend that's what's earned. So it's up to the people who are actually giving the money most of the time to decide whether they go into their principal or not. Oftentimes foundations like my own have a spend down, and big foundations have a spend down over a number of years. So to give away both the earnings and the principal. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it does. It does. My second question is really, I think, a much harder question. You folks who have amassed a huge amount of wealth in the current time frame, have one task in terms of convincing your compatriots to do what you folks have done. But what I see as a greater challenge is those who amass wealth in the next generation, not necessarily by inheritance, because that task would perhaps fall on you guys, but who amass it based on their own, hard work and strategic investments and so on and so forth. How are we in the Jewish community going to convince them to do what the kinds of things that you guys are doing, both for the Jewish Future Pledge and also for the then current needs of the community?
Well, there are really, I'll let Mark talk a lot on this one too, as well as Amy, but I just want to tell you, we also have a Jewish Youth Pledge, which we're testing with BBYO and with the NCSY. And that Jewish Youth Pledge says the commitment to the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And we've already gotten 25 signatures from NCSY, and we're waiting to develop a whole series of programs with the Jewish Youth Pledge, which will give some younger people a chance to make their commitments, not legally, but their commitments to Judaism and the Jewish people, so that every child who gets bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, or everyone who's in day schools or Jewish camping or whatever we can build that commitment up. Later on, what we want is, by doing the Jewish Future Pledge and passing it on to the next generation, there's our hope that of that next generation that earns that kind of money or additional money would be already involved in Jewish charitable situations from this generation's passing. So I think it is building a foundation of Jewish life generationally by doing the Jewish Youth Pledge, as well as the Jewish Future Pledge, both together. So that would be my hope, that Jewish organizations who deal with younger and next generation people like Birthright and others, Massa and others, who 6,000 kids are in Israel now for a year, gap years, things like that, that organization would try to get individuals involved in Jewish pledging, because that's where the stories would come. So I think it gives every Jewish organization a chance to go, no matter what their generational, no matter what age they're dealing with, to say, this is something that's part of your commitment to Judaism. So I leave it to maybe the others to say something. I don't want to answer all the questions.
Brian, I think it's also incumbent upon us to tell our kids and our grandchildren why be Jewish. We have to share our reasons for being Jewish. Words of the heart go to the heart, and we are encouraging people to share their reasons. When Mike tells his story, it's so heartwarming. The words, what you have to tell your children and grandchildren, they'll hear it. They may not look like they're hearing it. They may not listen, but they hear it. And I really believe these letters and things after you're gone are even much more important. My friends who have gotten them from their grandparents, the kids read them. The kids read them. And that's why it's so important that we share our stories and the great reasons for being Jewish.
Let me jump in. And again, if anyone else has questions to add, please either raise your hand or type them in the chat box. Any of y'all can answer this. When will you know you've been successful? What does that look like?
That's a very good question. Amy asked me that question when she got on, and she said, well, how many signatures do you want to get? And I said, 1 million. And she looked at me and she said, 1 million? I said, yeah, 1 million. And she couldn't believe it, because she was thinking about particular one segment of the market. And I'm thinking about everybody. And that's only really our real concentration is North America, because that's where the wealth numbers are. Where there is wealth in other Jewish communities, but we're not focusing on those at the moment. But there is, I mean, I can't imagine that if 27 or 30% of the Jewish people are committed, that's 4.5 million people. I guess somewhere around 4.5 million people on a global basis. So why can't I get 1 million people to sign the pledge? So that, I mean, I know it's a big idea, but I think that would be success. A lot of people know about it now, Brian, because our website's working. We're in social media. We're spending dollars to put it, to get the word out. And I won't be happy. I won't be happy unless we're at 1 million signatures. So that would be success. It may take me 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, but I think once the movement starts, it's going to self-generate itself, and it has to. So we're in here to get to that number.
Mark, I know Brian wants to hear from you.
Well, I would say that we're already tremendously successful, and I don't necessarily, Mike has big goals. He wants to get 1 million signatures, but the question is, how many people are aware of this now, and how many people have actually signed, and how many people are thinking about this? You have a huge movement that's already sort of undocumented, because we'll have how many people on this call listening and thinking about exactly what we said. It makes perfectly good sense. Plus, we have a lot of partnerships that are in the process of coming forward, and so we may have 8 or 10 partners now, but we're probably going to have 30 partners next year. So this is going to be a massive movement that's going to be intertwined in not only in in organizations like this, but in a lot of other local and national organizations. So I feel that we've invested a lot of time and energy to get to this point. I've done a lot of marketing, great videos, some great press about the Jewish Future Pledge. And I think 2021 is going to be a tremendous growth year. And the first process of the pledge always is to have some clarity of exactly what we're asking. We're not asking you to give any more Jewishly now or change any of your behaviors, other than maybe talk to your children a little bit, but we're asking you to sign something that's a moral commitment for the future. The great thing, the genius of the Jewish Future Pledge, it's about future generations for sure, and it's free. And so I feel that in this tight group that we're honored to even be able to sort of talk about something that can be so transformative, say now and for the future. I will remind everybody that Atlanta is the first and only, actually we're the first operating federation community to take on the pledge. And I did this when, I know Mike for years. And when I heard this idea, I really wanted to sort of bring this into Atlanta as a unique and really a different way to have different types of conversations with, donors, professionals, et cetera. And, we're at it about 15, 16 months. We're, north of a couple of hundred signatures and gaining a lot of momentum in Atlanta, and are looked at as sort of ground zero for how the pledge can really reach out into the community and partner with other organizations and create opportunities for some pretty decent dialogue, like Zoom calls like this, about what a difference this can mean for the Jewish future.
That's great. Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. We have just a few minutes left, so I want to give the floor to any of the three of you. If you have any final thoughts, closing thoughts, or what's the last thing that our participants should hear from you before they go on their learning way for the rest of the afternoon of our sessions for our conference.
Can I ask a question first? I've been trying to ask a question as well.
You may.
Okay, I teach a course in Jewish nonprofit organizations at Binghamton University to undergrads. And so I'm always looking at what's going on in nonprofits, Jewish nonprofits. And there are a number of organizations that have worked to try to help that next generation to be able to become more knowledgeable, to engage with Jewish nonprofits so that the continuity continues. So I see that piece. Slingshot was one of many. I wanted to know if you're working with them. And also, I think the most important part of what you've said is about telling the story and having those conversations with the next generations. Do you offer guidance in that? Are there things to help people to engage in that? Because as you astutely pointed out, signing a piece of paper is really only a small part. It's engaging the rest of your family and knowing what's happening to be able to have them engage as well.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm going to take this if you guys are okay. First of all, yes, I spoke to Slingshot recently. They've recently changed their mission where they're doing some philanthropic stuff, but I spoke to their executive director recently. And hopefully we will work with them and even be part of their program. As far as your second question, we have a resources section on our website where we tell people how to have conversations, how to write legacy letters. Erica Brown, she authored that, and we are in the process, hopefully for 2021, of rolling out many more resources on how to do that. So we're working with everybody who works with us. We're a small team, so there's only so many people we get to in a day. But we are about all the Jewish people. We're about every Jewish organization. We are committed to doing whatever we can to help.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. Amy, Mark, Mike, thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining us today. Any final thoughts you want to offer before we close up? And
Yeah, Dave, there was one question that I saw in the chat about working with the Life and Legacy from the Halo Greenspun Foundation. We have done a lot of work with them. We actually work together with them on a number of situations. Life and Legacy actually is based upon this generation's leaving a legacy in their will and whatever to various organizations they work with. So they're very involved with our process. We're involved with their process as well. Once again, we don't get in the way of any organization. We support every organization because every organization benefits from the Jewish Future Pledge. So it sort of helps them if somebody signed it. I suggest to Rabbi Barbara, who asked that question also, if you go on the website, Rabbi, and go through it, you will see stories from people as to why they signed, various different people. You'll see pictures of my children and what their reaction to and that generation, why they're signing, et cetera, and some other people that are on that website. That can be very helpful teaching from a methodology standpoint to any of the students in the next generation as well. So I think that might be able to be a great help. jewishfuturepledge.org. We have a wonderful marketing team that does that. And I recommend very highly for anybody in this call to go on the website. Amy and her people created it. It really defines the pledge and uses people, including from my family and Mark's family, to talk about what they've done. So it can be very educational.
And we're just beginning.
Well, good luck with this important work. Thank you, Mike, Amy, Mark, for joining us today at eFestival to tell us about the pledge, to tell us about your efforts. And it's we're rooting for you and excited by what you're doing and grateful for your time this morning. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, David.